Well, there are demonstrable studies that were being done involving Manson. So this is true. I mean, he was at the very least in observational studies, his family. These are so, I was actually just talking with Tom O'Neill last week about this because we're both interested in, I mean, I don't think it's determined yet that West, you can't put Jolly West in a room with Charles Manson, at least not in a documented way. Mm-hmm. But it is true that West had an office at the Haight-Ashbury Medical Clinic from the very beginning, and he was part of the crowd of people who were running the both the Haight-Ashbury Research Project, and his own observational study, which was really like a naturalistic study of these communes, of the different families, of how their psychodynamics and social dynamics worked. And so West and some of his colleagues were actually going into the field with the Manson family and others.
Really?
In Mendocino, yeah. And one of them was Alan Rose. And I mean, so there are people such as a graduate student and assistant at the Haight-Ashbury Medical Clinic named Gary Landis, so they are personally links between West and people like Alan Rose. And they were definitely treating the Manson and his family at the clinic. So you can bring them so close, but you don't really know. It's hard to tell exactly, if you want to trace West's role. What I do see is that people for many years were saying that the hippies turned from LSD to speed later, and that this caused the Haight to become a violent and unpleasant place after the Flower Child period. Mm-hmm. And so the Amphetamine Research Project was tracking and interviewing these young, runaways and stuff, starting in 68, I think it was. Yeah, 68. So one of the people working for West, Gary Landis, talks about how he went into the medical clinic and he observed them interviewing kids who were amphetamine addicts. They were tracking them over time. So West used to say something or people used to say, Manson was unusual in that he was a speed addict first, and then he got into LSD, and then he stopped because he didn't really like needles. But his family definitely, this was the lore, why maybe amphetamines didn't have anything to do with the murders or whatever. This is what people used to say. But actually, it does seem that he and his family were increasingly turning to speed at the same time, or amphetamines and speed.
Injecting it?
Well, maybe not injecting it because he didn't like needles.
Gotcha.
But, they could be orally taking it, or
right.
It's not, this is just something that has come up in various interviews. But there was a curiosity about triggering violence and the potential connection between LSD and violence, and certainly Manson obviously used LSD in his relationships. I mean, this is,
right.
His people like his Susan Atkins and others talked about how they would try never to come down. They were vying to see who could never come down from one day to another. So they were very addled, and then if you add other substances. So it's interesting. I mean, there are parallels in the NIMH funded research. So you don't see the name CIA. You don't see any of these earlier cutouts.
What is NIMH?
The National Institute of Mental Health.
Okay.
They were funding a couple of these projects.
Right.
Because they were just interested. They were interested, and they wanted, on one level, they had an interest in curing addiction. There seemed to be a mass epidemic of amphetamine addiction.
Dr.
Jose Delgado.
He was
Look
known,
him up, Austin.
He was known as the father of brain chips, and so he was from Yale University, and he did a lot of brain experimentation, stuff that is unethical and we wouldn't allow today per se, but we made progress of understanding the brain. He would actually wire up people. His most famous experiment was with a bull. He implanted bull with a radio frequency chip, and he could make a bull stop from charging by pressing a button. And that impressed everybody quite a bit.
Wow.
But that's using brain chips. And
where was he? Was he in the United States?
Yeah.
but you don't need chips anymore.
Okay, this is him with the bull.
Yeah, there he is.
Dr. Jose Delgado steps into the Spanish bull ring as a bold demonstration of his research.
A risky behavioral control demonstration.
Wow. And he was working with the government? He had a famous quote, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Let's see if you can bring up the quote. Mankind does not have a right to develop his own mind.
Austin, pull up his quote. So what was Delgado what did he do? Where was he working from? What was he working in one of the universities here?
Yes, he was working at Yale Medical School, and he would insert wires into people's brains, and there's always two sides to the story.
Okay, here it is. Man does not have the right to develop his own mind. This kind of liberal orientation has great appeal. We must electrically control the brain. Someday, armies and generals will be in control by electrical stimulation of the brain.
And that was in the 60s, I believe.
Whoa.
So
that's heavy.
We've come a long way since.
Yeah, I mean, if people were openly talking about that in the 60s, where are we now? And where are other nations like China and Russia and Iran?
We boycotted recently like over 100 countries from doing companies in China because they were working on mind control technologies. So, it's very much out in the open, but it's just people don't want to recognize their soul, so to speak, can be touched. Their very ego, their sense of self can be altered. They're not in control of their own emotions. That means if you don't have free will or autonomy or choice, democracies don't exist. That means religions don't exist. That means a whole bunch of things. Markets can be shaped, moved up or down at will based on people's preferences. It's total domination of the world. That's how important and why it's kept so secret. I think it's the ultimate weapon, because if you can control the people with their fingers on nuclear weapons, you're one step ahead. So this is kind of the end game, is full control of the human mind.
Stephen Hawking, the great physicist who died a few years ago, warned about a number of times, that even Elon Musk warns about every now and then, depending on his mood, that these AIs could literally take us down, could take us out.
Yeah.
And there's lots of sci-fi movies in which that happens. I just submitted, for publication, a short story, which is called The Last Confession. And it's about AI basically not only taking out humanity here on Earth, which it does, but it turns out it, thanks to my neural transduction theory, it learns how to cross over to other universes and wipes out all organic, intelligent life everywhere in every universe. So
sounds like a P.K. Dick novel.
Yes, one of my favorite authors. My point is that AI is extremely dangerous. AI, one of my books is on AI. I used to run the annual Loebner Prize competition in artificial intelligence, which made the front page of the New York Times in 1991 and continued to run for 29 years. It was an annual contest where we're looking for a computer that can pass the Turing test, meaning that can out-human a human, that can behave as human as any human can behave. And so I've followed very, very closely. I've followed the development of AI, a lot of frustrating years, big breakthroughs just in the past 2 or 3 years, mainly with OpenAI and ChatGPT. But people don't get it. They don't understand that if you start integrating AI technology into every other kind of technology, which is literally what's happening right this second, it puts us into very, very grave danger. And that's what Stephen Hawking was concerned about, that we would just do this willy-nilly without any protections. Last year or the year before, Gregory Hinson, one of the top AI experts in the world, who was Google's top AI expert, he quit Google.
The way he explains MK Ultra is just fascinating. How it's basically, he had to go to different countries, went to Germany just because he was violating the human right. Like the stuff he was doing, he had a license to kill from the government.
Oh, yeah,
he was destroying people.
So you had him on the podcast?
Yeah.
How'd it go?
It was great.
Maybe it was you guys. Somebody asked me if I would go on a podcast with him. And I
Yes,
said...
yes, it was. Yeah, I wanted to have you guys both on together.
And I said, I don't think he'd do it. His book is very straightforward. He's a New York Times best-selling author.
Yeah.
It's not academic, but it's very sober. I don't think he'd want to be in my category.
He kind of shut down a little bit when I started to ask him about Charles Manson.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I'd love to sit down and ask him why Charlie West isn't even in his index in his book. And this guy, my book was already out before his book. And nobody wants to take somebody else's findings. Even you would obviously acknowledge them. But I have the documents. I show that he was Gottlieb's first psychiatric partner when he was at the Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. I have all the letters that I found that West accidentally left in his archive at UCLA, where they're page after page after page describing what kind of experiments they're going to do. They're all illegal on patients. And West says we can hide it from the other doctors on these wards because the patients are already suffering from mental illness. So what I do to them is just going to look like another one of but it's going to be with my drugs and hypnosis. And Gottlieb's like, well, you have to double, all the ways they're going to hide their correspondence. Gottlieb had an alias. He wanted West to have an alias, but West didn't want one because he thought that would draw attention if anybody caught that. So he did that from 53 to at least 67, 68. I've got a paper record of him corresponding with Gottlieb, and nobody has the unredacted record like I do. Like everything Kinzer saw, here's a little bit of my sour grapes, was stuff he got through other people's Freedom of Information Act requests, and it's all redacted. Because I read his book, he doesn't have new information in there from documents. He's got a lot of great stuff in there that fills in gaps. But for him to completely ignore the scientists that John Marks is the whistleblower who was a State Department official who found these financial records for MK Ultra, went to Congress, told them about it, caused a congressional investigation. Seymour Hersh, the famous investigative journalist, worked with Marks, and he wrote the first big stories in 1974 or 5 on this horrifying program that our government did since the early 50s, where they were testing drugs on people without their awareness, making them human guinea pigs, and some of these people died, committed suicide or had massive nervous breakdowns.
Right.
So I didn't think Kinzer was, if he hadn't even mentioned my findings, I knew that he didn't want to have anything to do with my book.
Why would what would be his reasoning of ignoring the stuff about West?
Do you want to know what other people tell me?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm fascinated by it.
Do you know what a limited hangout is?
What's a limited hangout?
A limited hangout is when an agency uses a media person to release more information than they've released before because it's coming out anyway or is about to come out, to try to keep people from suspecting even worse.
I always wonder whether or not with the stuff that they were testing on Charles Manson and the family, like were they trying to aim for a specific result, or were they just throwing shit at the wall to basically see what would happen? Or were they trying to guide them in any specific way,
I'm not sure they were even testing on them. I mean, I don't think that's been proven. I think they were naturalistically observing them. And
they were just observing them as like wild animals.
And also, the problem is with naturalistic observation is people, throughout time they get involved with their subjects. And West himself in his own diary wrote, "I'm getting too close to my subjects." These were he was involved in many different things.
Right.
And his other of his team also became involved. Like they not only went to, sort of anthropologically observe the family, but they were sleeping with them sometimes, the women, or they sort of get involved, but I'm not sure I don't believe that there were formal, at least nothing in the record, nothing that they would have published or nothing that NIMH would have sponsored, which would have allowed the actually giving or, testing or experimenting with Manson or anything like that.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest questions about that, though, is like, why did he kept getting let out of prison by Roger Smith,
Well, this is such a good, it's true. It's remarkable. So you can say it is possible. So that there could be clandestine papers, studies, who knows, but Roger Smith it's really odd that he was both, a prominent researcher in amphetamine addiction. He was doing these experiments with mice and with complicated protocols. He was also friends with David A. Smith, who ran the Haight-Ashbury Medical Clinic, and he was Manson's parole officer. Like, that's very hard to understand, and he kept releasing him. But he says that, I think he said at one point, there was a program to try releasing parolees to see if they would do better. I mean, it doesn't really, like a criminological experiment of some kind. It's not easily explained. I think that's why Tom O'Neill's book is very striking.
I mean, he didn't commit any like real violent crimes though, did he? Before that, weren't they just like petty theft and like stealing a car and some other things that wouldn't lock him up forever? Or did he actually like?
Well, he and his family did kill a Buddhist practitioner in a drug deal, some sort of right before the murders.
Oh yes.
But before that, Manson actually his family was known. Some people say, at least Alan Rose at one point said, actually they're kind of like model hippies. At least he takes care of them. He brings them to the doctor. They're not just in squalor, but because he was pimping out the women in the family too. But so, and he had career ambitions, Manson. So
right, yeah.
So yeah, I don't think he didn't have
Beach Boys.
He didn't have actually much history of violence that I know of. Like he of course he didn't commit these murders himself. His family did.
Right.
And so that's why the monkey brain experiments that they were doing at Duke, we can't fathom what us three, if our brains were connected at the speed of thought, could come up with or think about. We have to use vibrations from our throat, deciphered through our brains, through our ears, and then and talk. It's kind of an outdated form of communication amongst brains.
Well, I mean, think about it. If something like Neuralink actually came onto the market as a consumer product, that people could get this neural net inserted into their brain, and they could give them the ability to learn new skills instantaneously, or download books within seconds, or like the advantage economically would be astounding.
Yes.
And more and more people would adopt this
in order to compete.
In order to compete. But the scale, the downside of something like this is, once you have this, it would be no problem. You would almost assume that the government would be able to have some level of control over this.
It would have to, and that's why they're kind of experimenting. What are the potential downfalls? We have a term of mind viruses. How do memes pass?
Mind viruses.
Could you hack, if all the minds were connected, could you insert a virus that might shut down the human race?
That's fascinating. The term mind virus, I've used that, and I've heard it used a lot when it comes to things like QAnon. Are you familiar with QAnon?
I heard of them, yes.
So there's it's a group of people online who follow this anonymous poster on these threads, these forums, and this guy pretends to be he pretended to be one of Trump's right-hand guys, and he would make these anonymous posts talking to all these people, and all these people called him Q. And they thought that this guy was real. This guy was one of the people right next to him. And he'd make these cryptic anonymous quotes. And there was this there was this like super hyper just like hyper passionate political group of people who were Trump supporters, and they believed that this Q person was going to save them and giving them these directives of what was going to happen next and to be prepared for the storm that's coming, and that led to the Capitol being raided. And they find all these little things. They find like something Trump said during one of his speeches, and okay, that sentence means this. That means we have to storm the Capitol. And they keep finding all these synchronicities online, and they think they mean something more.
Humans look for meaning and purpose, and we find it in the strangest places. It's like looking at clouds. We'll see shapes. Is it chaos or is it order?
It almost if anything seems like a mind virus, something like that seems like it's a mind virus.